parenting.
Yes, sir.
You at first has to check yourself. How were you parented?
Yeah.
Because the way I was parented, I just vowed that my kids, I'm not gonna parent them like this.
This is the Dr. Tlaleng Mofokeng Show.
Never forget to fix your crown. Living is easy when you know who you are. You should know who you are. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much for being here.
Welcome to the Dr. Tlaleng Mofokeng Show. Ke nna Dr. Tlaleng Mofokeng, ke nna ngwana wa Magwaza. And on this episode, I bring you an issue that's really important to my heart. Re utlwisisa bana, re hlonepha bana, jwang with the understanding that they are fully human with rights like all of us. As a society, as communities, how do we create environments where children can not just merely survive, but can truly thrive?
This is the Dr. Tlaleng Mofokeng Show.
What does it look like to create a space, a country, and Africa where every child everywhere can express themselves, can be affirmed, and can truly be supported from transitioning from childhood into adulthood in full expression of joy? Behold, it is a revolution. And we have the privilege of having around this table with me today amazing experts who are not only dedicating their lives or their time to raising individual children of their own, but they are doing the processes of caregiving to ensure that children can thrive. Around this table, I have colleagues and friends and people I'm also very excited to get to know better. Mahlodi, I've got Bradley, and I've got Virginia, and I also have Naledi. I'm going to ask you, each of you, to introduce yourselves and tell us the organizations that you represent and the work that you do before we get into the conversation.
Okay. My name is Mahlodi Zondo. I'm from Amani Good Parenting. It's a mental health awareness center. We are based in Soweto. We deal with children from 0 to 18 years, mostly with parenting skills for parents to prevent punitive parenting. And another thing that we mostly look into now is the ECDs, the early child development, whereby we train practitioners how to early identify sicknesses with children like ADHD, autism, and others.
Thank you so much. And Bradley?
So my name's Bradley Daniels, and I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I'm in private practice. So I work across the spectrum of psychological disorders, adjustment disorders, just really a broad spectrum. And in terms of working with children, I tend to mostly only work with some children, particularly queer children, because they don't have any other spaces to go to. So I work with a lot of transgender children. But my main focus is really the adults. And what's interesting for me is working with the adults is really where I get an opportunity to sort of work with the injured or the traumatized child. And so that's often my perspective.
The child that's coming up later is the adult. Yeah.
So that's the main ambit of the work that I do.
Yeah, thanks. And to you, Virginia?
My name is Virginia Magwaza. I'm a mother of 3 beautiful human beings, a 35-year-old, 27, and an 18-year-old son. Those are my biological children, but I have raised and taken care of many children. I'm known as a mother of the queers because I also founded an organization called Parents, Families and Friends of South African Queers, which is an organization that mobilizes parents, family members and allies of queer people in understanding issues of sexual orientation, gender identity and or expression, and sex characteristics.
Thank you for being here. Nice to see you again. And Naledi?
Timela, ke thabetse ba mona. Nna ke Naledi Mabeleng, and I'm from an organization e bitswang Bakbala Creative Arts and Services. I'm a teacher facilitator. So I go to different schools and facilitate performing arts because that's my background. And specifically, I do apply drama and theater and drama therapy.
For me, what's really important is to acknowledge, right, that as much as we would have wanted to have all those little children around this table, we need to think about them and protecting, their own dignity and safety as well. So, as we think about, childhood, and knowing that we live in this country that we live in, the conversations can tend to be quite negative about what we lack, about what's not going right, and all of that, and not enough of painting the picture of what do we want and what can this solutions look like, and from where they come from. So please paint for me, Mahlodi, one of your best childhood memories, and where you genuinely felt like a child.
Hey, that one is a bit deep because the time I was aware that I'm Mahlodi, already I had responsibilities. But the one thing that I loved doing was reading. So it was like not playing with other kids, but like, my mom would buy Sunday Times. You know how thick was Sunday Times? Not yet at school. And that other part of comic thing is yours, and you must read aloud. That is the where I got my joy and my happiness, and delving into books became something else. My mom had a stack of James Hadley Chase books, Mills and Boons, whatever. You don't read those, ne? Because now I could read, so started hiding them.
I hope you did grab one or two and
You said I didn't.
oh good, exactly.
I remember what mornings were like in our household, where for the first 5 years of my life, I was an only child. My brother came thereafter. And, so my parents would sort of get up and get ready for work, and they would sort of leave me sleeping in the bed. And then the last thing they would do was to make the bed. But I remember my dad would then pick me up, put me in a whole bunch of blankets on the floor, and then make the bed, and then take me in that bunch of blankets, put me in the back of a car. And we would then drive to my grandparents' place where, and I remember laying and my eyes closed, and I would be able to follow, okay, left turn, right turn, we're almost there, da-da-da. Pick me up again, put me back into bed at my grandmother's.
You're pretending to be sleeping.
No, yeah, but also just enjoying. And then
Exploiting.
my grandparents would sort of then have a second wake up in the most gentle of ways, and I have a hard breakfast, and then get taken to school. And for me, I think that was just, sort of the richness of the quality of care, which I think I took for granted. But when other people heard it, they're like, wow, like you
Yeah,
really,
that sounds incredible.
so like a little prince. And then I'm still a little prince now. So
Also, many families, mornings are a nightmare.
yes.
Mornings are.
And I'm sure that feeds into some sense of ritual and
Absolutely. And I do the same for the kids that I look after. I repeat that sort of quality of care. Even my dog gets that quality of care. I mean, she sleeps late. I mean, I have to say, okay, we really have to make the bed.
Because I know even my kids, you don't get to wake them anyway. There's
Yeah.
a particular way
Always.
because Granny wakes them up in a very gentle,
Yes.
it's a very gentle
Wow.
Yes.
coming out of, and you don't.
Eh, Fugan.
Yes.
I said it.
No, Fugan.
I just wanted to just add one more thing. So my grandparents had like almost like a small holding, if you want. But it sounds fancier than what it is. But there were lots of trees and sort of, so I also had the opportunity with my other two cousins, because we were only three grandchildren at one stage, and to like sort of play in the trees.
Yes,
There was
yes.
lots of reading. My grandfather was a big sort of reading enthusiast, so there was lots of books and discussions and things. So there was just, I wish I could replicate that life for as many kids as possible. And it's not about sort of it's not about the money necessarily. It's really the attention to care.
And the intention.
And the intention
Someone
as
is
well.
intentional about giving that to you.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And Virginia, for you, what is this childhood memory? Where do you go to where you felt, yeah, man, I'm genuinely like Kimwana, and this is
So my home was is now it's known as taverns. Kanako, it was Ospoto, right? It was a huge spot. My mom was a very big shipping queen, right? So there would be music playing, and my brother was a dancer, right? And so I had always learned. Eh, Nina Kiacha, I won't say that.
Me too.
So and he would always make sure that when we are now planning to dance, he sits me on his lap, and he would say, "Sit here, my kid sister." And I've always not taken into consideration why he always emphasized that I'm the kid's sister because I'm the last born. But there's also a sister before me, and there's a huge history, about our parents that she thought she was going to be the last born, and then I came. So my brother always emphasized that. So then we would dance and dance, and then people would be giving money, and my brother would be like, "It's yours."
Oh, all of it.
Yes. So I was always rich, and I would always boast and say, "Hey, I'm a dollar babe."
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Yeah, and I've always had like money to do stuff. I never had to save, and no, I always have time to make money. So
No, I love the dollar baby. Could always that
So for me, I even wrote my research about it. I lost my mother when I was very young. I was 4, turning 5. So for all those years, her being absent, I felt alone. There was my aunt, there was my dad, but I always felt alone. Until I went koholo. There was dance and drama. I think that's where the love started. So I used to go there every day after school. Then get there, practice dancing, practice singing, whatever. So for me, that was my safe place. That was my home. And I think it rubbed off to a point where it became me, became my career. There was nothing else I could think of to give back to the children because it was the same thing that was given to me. So that's my happy place when I think Kadi afternoon hake holong practicing.
That's amazing. And it gets me thinking of how little of those spaces we now have, where you can go as a child, discover the world, but also find yourself, right? And have some feeling of growing up.
and pride as well.
Yeah.
Feeling of pride.
In such spaces, they also help the child to be able to socialize.
Yes.
It also helps the child to know to wait their turn. They know that they become empathetic. They know that there's a friend of mine, maybe we're doing this gambut dance. She doesn't have gambut dance, then gets home and makes up a story, and then mama, please, can that one? So empathy also develops in that one. And that was a safe emotional space also.
Yes.
Because when you were there, you could be yourself.
Yes.
There was nobody saying my mom this, my mom
Yes.
that, because as a young child, after you've lost your mother, you become very sensitive. I can
Yeah.
believe that when somebody starts talking about their mother, it's like they're posting
Yeah, it's
towards you. So there, everybody was just a child. Having fun.
And also for me, it was very safe because my older sister was there and we were staying at different households. So it was time for me to bond with my sister. So I would go no matter what because I know my big sister is there. I wanted to see my sister.
It's so incredible, man. And did you ever at some point feel then you had to grow up maybe too early?
Yes, definitely. I had to grow up very fast because now you in a household where you don't belong. It's your family, but you don't belong because sometimes constantly your cousins would remind you that you don't have a mother. It's not your home, And at that time, my father was a policeman, so he would go sometimes for days. I don't see him because he comes at night, he goes in the morning, he shift. So I cannot make it lelang thing, So Hanikia practicing, I would feel that it's safe because there's also older people that are like my role models. So I had hope that one day I'm gonna look like her, I'm gonna dance like her. So it sparked a lot of light in me.
And for you, Vijay, did you ever feel that you grew up maybe too early or there was an incident or...
I grew up without my mother and my father because I'm very old. In 1976, I was already living and we had to run away from the uprising to KwaZulu-Natal in Potchefstroom, in the villages. I had to carry water. I carried 25 liters on my head when I was in my age of 11. And I carried wood. And that process of carrying wood is so patriarchal. Women will always like boast who will be a better wife.
Or from the carrying of
From the carrying of the wood, and there's a way in which you have to pile them so that you can carry them on the head. It was such a very, very taxing situation. But also, as much as I felt like it forced me to be a grown-up early, but it also strengthened me because even today I know how to do other things that other people can do.
Uzotwalela my wood for the fire.
Ngingathwala nawe.
Oh my gosh. And Bradley, I'm going to ask you this one first because it sounds like, your family and your upbringing, very affirming already from the get-go. But do you have a memory where you felt that your voice was silenced as a child? And what was that incident perhaps? And where do you think that came from?
I sort of, not in my family directly. In fact, I really, and I'm actually connecting with this now quite strongly. I really was quite blessed to be in quite an affirming, open-minded sort of family where I think all the kids' our voices were heard. And even reflecting on the question, did I ever feel like I grew up too quickly? I would say no. I think I was the one who was jacking growing up because by the time I think I did, that's something, So by the time I was 17, I packed up and left and moved to England all by myself. Where in my family people had perhaps not even flown overseas yet. So I didn't ever feel like I had to grow up too quickly. I felt like I was just ready to take on the world, much easier and far quicker.
You're the ready-made.
The ready-made.
Ever ready, bitch.
Dollar baby, ever ready, baby.
Absolutely. And I think in terms of voice being silent, I think I sometimes encountered that in the education system, and particularly primary education, because I was fortunate that by the time I got to what's now grade 7, standard 5, I got a scholarship to go to a really embracing private school, very small, St. Barnabas College, which was set up to really give children that look like me an opportunity for a world-class education in apartheid South Africa then. And that changed my life. If I hadn't had that experience, I don't think I could even have been sitting here right now. I would have had a very different trajectory.
Bradley, a Richie's boy.
So I worked for it. But in primary, in a township school, that's where I remember being silenced. Being silenced for being doing too much. I said you must only do the first 3 questions. Why did you do the whole exercise? And actually being reprimanded for that. Can you imagine being reprimanded for striving for excellence and doing, So I think that's the space where I can recall kind of sometimes feeling silenced or feeling like, you have to do less, you have to dim your light a little bit.
And Mahlodi, you work with parents, you provide them with parenting skills. I think something that's really important because we think just by virtue of being able to make a human, you now have all the skills required to raise one. And I highly believe and recommend that people actually introspect a bit more, right? So that we're intentional in how and what we say and how we raise children. So I want to know from you, have you experienced through the work that you do, or maybe even for yourself, parents living their lives and dictating their lives through, their children?
It's the order of the day.
That one, is very painful. You'll find a child who's struggling academically, beautiful in art, doing very well in art. You are interviewing the child, you think she's not listening to you, she's drawing, she's looking at you like, that looks like me. Then they must say, this one, no, she's not, I've paid so much school fees for her and she's not passing, but then at some stage you say, okay, baby girl, can you go and finish your drawing somewhere else? Mama, let's talk. What is happening? What did you miss when growing up that you want this child to live for you? If you wanted to be a doctor, you should have gone to school.
But also, Mahlodi, there's a possibility that it's not because they are forcing their child. That's what they know. The society is telling us that the only way to prosper is through going to school. If not,
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I support that one. Then you have to sit the parent down that, my dearest, there are different kind of school streams. There are special schools, there are mainstreams, there are taking class streams. And we can be born by the same woman, but one with the same. And I agree, every parent what's the best for their children. Everybody, when they are given a baby, would say, I've got dreams for my child, best dreams. But the difficult part is when Motswadi are pushing what she wants that child to be, irrespective of seeing all the evidences, like maybe psychological, does a psychological assessment, and this child like is borderline IQ. This child won't make it in mainstream.
Libo Brady, but we can't even take our children to the
assessments.
And also, the other challenge is that, parenting, everything that you do has a manual. There's no manual for parenting. You buy this fridge, there's a manual on how to operate. You buy a TV, there's a manual, but no manual for parenting. So you need to figure it out.
With parenting,
Yes, sir.
you at first has to check yourself, how were you parented?
Yeah.
Because it starts from there.
Reflection.
The way Mahlodi was parented, it might be the way Mahlodi will parent her kids. But the way I was parented, I just vowed that my kids, I'm not gonna parent them like this. My mom did everything for me. I don't wanna lie, materially, everything, but emotionally, sure. Because that is how she was also raised. But when coming to the thing of not having a manual, it's very difficult. So there's no good parent, there's no bad parent, it's good enough parent.
Good. I like
I
that.
can kind of go when, like we're saying, ha re batle ho punisha bana when you discipline them. We must use other different methods, even if they did something wrong, and then just be like punitive all the time. Living language, it must be building and not so bad that it even hacks away their self-esteem.
If I can just come in there, because there's some important nuances that are coming up here. So the question around, as parents, people want the best for their children, but sometimes it can actually become, quite sort of difficult when the parents sort of like almost are too hard on the kids to be a particular way. So that's the easiest to see part. And the place where I often see this as well is like where parents refer their children for therapists, particularly teenagers or adolescents. And particularly in my case, where it often would be queer kids or transgender kids who don't have many spaces they could go to. And often what I find is the child is actually perfectly well adjusted, and then I have to actually get away to say, okay, but parents, you come.
You need therapy.
And that's only how I sort of embrace that, But also to speak to the other point that not everyone has access to necessarily therapy. I mean, I work in a very privileged environment where people that come can afford to come, but I think this is where we need to partner, because we need. I often the schools, the sort of like places that do performance arts, the drama therapy. And
In the rural areas as well. I mean, Kwankwa is far from everywhere.
that safe space in spaces like that, performance arts, in the sports environment. So it just means the conversations need to happen between the different disciplines or the different sort of.
And then
avenues.
having the mothers or the parents, the grannies who are taking care of their children,
The thing
knowing
is that,
the skills.
which is very good, is that like we are now targeting the early child development centers, trying to get the children while they're still young, also trying to get the parents when the children are still young, so that they can be able
And those teachers in the crèches.
the teachers are the first line of that needs help. Because at times when you get into a facility, you find that teacher, she doesn't know who you are. You just come in and then you saw something happening. There's like you follow up. Some of them we do refer for mental health themselves, because how can they deal with children who are vulnerable, who are in that being developed emotional, and they themselves got their own packages. Then and there's some that we call emotional attachment.
Yes.
But they're not emotional attached, those teachers, because that's what I've always seen. I need to make a disclosure. By profession, I'm a child psych specialist. I'm working at Charlotte Magwaza, so a child unit. So what we normally see is that the parents of children who come in, and then that those children are diagnosed with a conduct disorder. We ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to work at the crèche and look after children. I love children.
But that's
But you ask yourself, with this, love children, you've got baggages you haven't dealt with. So when they're in such a space, they become a bit of a disaster themselves.
Yes.
Then you find that the parents don't connect with them. They hit the kids. There was a crash at Lehigh. I was so touched. The mother came in complaining that the teacher hit the child with the belt at the crash. Then you ask the principal, what is your criteria of interviewing?
I just want to tie a couple of things in there. So that child in that environment with sort of early childhood conduct disorder, that's going to be potentially, without the right intervention, become the next borderline personality disorder. And then to tie back to what Virginia said in terms of parenting doesn't come with a manual. Now watch the space. There is a manual, and the manual is an unconscious manual that we each will have based on our own parenting. And
The morality.
that's the manual we need to be familiar with, because that's what being conscious of that manual is what stops us from being able to repeat the same traumas that happened in our childhoods.
But also, Bradley, you cannot separate parenting and as human beings also with political, economic, social issues that we are faced with also as parents, right? Because there are children who in countries, I know I used to work with some Norwegians, the parents were paid to be housewives.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes,
Or
that's social
husbands,
support.
you know.
Yes.
There's that social support, and they have the time to check the books. We can't even check the books because we are running for taxis up and down, and we are even exploited at our work. We are angry with our bosses. Those things are very connected.
And I think that's where what was already said around the good enough parenting is what is actually the right ingredient, not perfect
The
parenting.
best.
So, because we have to work with the life circumstances as they are, not as they should have been, as would have liked. I would love to raise kids in a Scandinavian environment where people can leave their prams outside the door with
The reason I said that, Bradley said, we have a wonderful Children's Act, right?
Yes.
It's the law,
Exactly.
but it cannot come alone. There are many other
It
things.
remains abstract.
Exactly.
Right?
There are many other things that must hold it so that it can
But here's the
flourish.
other thing about the law and the rights that are there. You will then often hear when those children demand their rights, let's say you are being an African, right? And what's an African about those values of respect and knowing your
So I also told you how Umbegi hostelisa ngabantwana and gave children more rights than us.
because our
Yes,
Yes.
and yeah.
So we see all the TikToks where like sort of parents that look like us say, oh, I don't know, my kid was demanding his rights and reciting things. And when I was growing up, it was not, if you talk back, it's already a new as a new. Right?
Yeah.
So now this is a different environment. And I think we really, what comes to mind for me is we must move away from the idea that only certain ideal conditions can make those rights come alive. There's smaller ways in which we can also bring those rights alive in our smaller households.
Yeah, because the way I normally talk with my parents when they tell me that I write too much, I say you also have an R that you can use against them. Responsibility. Yes. When they say I've got rights for this responsibility, so
Rights and
those rights won't be sung as loud, but you must also know that you also need to respect them.
Yeah.
So that there are
Children as
their rights, responsibility, and respect. So respect goes both ways. So with responsibilities, there was this lady I did, I think 3 sessions on parental counseling. I was just drilling her on responsibility. Don't just be consistent with that thing. Responsibility. She says, Mahlodi, that worked like a gem. By the way, it comes them down.
That's the boundary. It says you've got the right, and here's the boundary.
Yes, because
But it also allows
we don't have weapons anymore.
it allows them to internally have the process of thinking about is this actually worth taking the risk that I want to take?
Because they can also
and
be
what are
very
the repercussions, right? Yeah. Because you want to, they mustn't come to you every time for a question or for information. We also need to have children to build that life skill, to have that independence emotionally, intellectually, to also be able to say, actually, this isn't good. They need to be able to be at some point, this isn't good for me, this is why it's not good.
I once brought my a Bill of Rights to my kids, and I said, "This is what the Constitution say. Your rights. This is what they are saying. But however, you must understand that it says basic.
Yes.
And I've given you more than basic because you've flown to Cape Town, you've gone to vacations, you've been to German schools, which other kids didn't have not had." So that means you need to appreciate and also guard against your privilege and take responsibility of making sure that you become who you are supposed to be. Because I don't want to be giving you 50 cents, 5 rand after matric because you don't know what you should do. So as much as we need to be positive in our parenting, we also need to be very hard at loving them, but also at showing them the way. Because I find out that some of the parents, they want to compromise a lot, you know. They want to correct the wrongs of their parents and do everything for their children without giving them a life. Because we need to raise our children knowing very well that maybe tomorrow might not be there.
Yes.
You know,